has begun. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're gonna dig into the maps part of story maps. So we will dive right in. There is a PDF that Margaret sent out just before, about an hour before we get started here. So if you do want to follow along, we've got a bunch of links in here that you can use as we go, and then a bunch of resources for everybody to kind of refer back to at the end. And perhaps we'll have even a few more to add to that afterwards, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So if you do want to use this to get started, jump on that first link right there. There's also, you can access the same thing from this other data store link. There are some NRSS specific tips and guidance in there, guidance that applies to story maps as well as web maps and just pretty much everything you do in ArcGIS Online. In particular in there, always good to check out the acceptable use policy for ArcGIS Online and figure out what you want to use it for versus the portal and things like that. So anyway, to dive right in. So the ArcGIS Online thing right here, you should definitely see your name in the top. Make sure you're signed in. And then for mapping, we are going to head right to the map item in the menu there. So here is the screen we get for mapping. This is kind of where you come when you preview a web map. It's where you come when you're like creating a story map, and you get the option to create map or add a map. When you click create, this is where you come. All map creation things kind of lead back to here. So just take a look around the interface real quick. The menu for ArcGIS Online has moved to the top left, so you can still see like your content tab and your home and your gallery, groups, organization, all that is up here. So you can skip around there if you need to. We've got details. This will be where you kind of see the details of your map. It's also got some useful links. Well, at least one useful link, this pop-up link. If you are building a map with pop-ups, that can be a really useful thing to open ahead of time before you get started to refer back to. But for now, we'll stay in here and have a look around. You've got new maps, so all the maps that you recently worked on are going to show up in here, and also create new. And we've got add base map. Here's where you'll come to save it. You have to kind of do a little stuff first. But yeah, so we're going to start here with the base maps. Kind of the first step for any web map that you create is going to be to pick your base map. And you kind of want to consider when you're choosing your base map who your audience is, what they're going to want to see, how complicated it should be, how quickly it should load, and just what story you're telling with your map. Because there's a lot of options in here. So kind of answering some of those questions about your story, about your audience ahead of time will help you decide. The first place that you should jump to when we're talking about base maps are, if you scroll down a little ways, there are a bunch of NPS options. We've got Park Tiles Imagery, OSM, that one stands for Park Tiles Imagery OpenStreetMap. And then there's some different variations. We've got light, we've got a slate, a dark base map, a couple variations on that. Standard, so this will be the default one that you'd go to for most uses. It kind of points out all the parks, and as you zoom in, we can type in, we've got Petrified Forest, up here in the search. This is your find an address spot. So that takes you right into Petrified Forest. Not the right one. Here we go. That looks better. So this is the Park Tiles standard base map for Petrified Forest. I don't know what's happening with the shading there. Might need to tell someone about that. This is the light version. Again, OpenStreetMaps, just a little bit of a different variation. Which one you use, like OpenStreetMaps versus standard, part of that is going to depend on which one looks best for your specific park. There's differences in the amount of data that the Park Tiles base map has for each park. Some of it's been more or less customized and corrected. Sometimes the OpenStreetMap version will have, a street name correct that the Park Tiles standard doesn't. So that can kind of help you choose. There's also a couple of options. One that is an SL, and what that stands for is sans labels. So that's going to have your boundaries and stuff, but it's not going to label anything. It helps kind of clear things up if you want to have your own labels, or if you're going to have other busy stuff going on there. And the SLSB, this is sans labels, sans boundaries. So that's not even going to have the park boundaries. And so for this one, where the boundary for Petrified Forest is all, the shading is all weird, I maybe don't want to use the Park Tiles boundaries at all, and maybe I want to add it myself. So you choose the one without the boundaries, and it's still going to have various other park details, but it won't have the boundaries. It's a lot cleaner.
A quick question, Jessica, that came in.
Sure.
And do you know about the update schedule for the park base maps? Is it a quarterly update, or do you know?
I do not know. That's a good question.
Okay.
I do have some links to, there's a link to the Park Tiles webpage. It has a webpage in our document here, and there's some contact information on there right over here. So that might be a good place to start on that. I think folks can submit updates on a regular basis, but I don't know how often they get pushed out.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So those are the NPS base maps. You can use the other ones too. They're definitely here. There's also a way to layer base maps, which we can get into a little bit later. Basically, the most important thing is choose the right tool for the job. But start with an NPS Park Tiles if that'll work for you. All right. So now let's just jump really quick into creating really custom layers. Say you don't have anything from your GIS specialist. You just kind of want to draw it on here effectively, add a point, add a shape just right here on the map. So the way to get started with that is up here with the add menu. You've got a bunch of options, and the very last one is add map notes, and that's for custom layers. And you can give it a name. So we can say park name. And now we get all kinds of options over here in the left. So clicking on one of these will help you create one of these items. So that could be if you wanted to draw freehand around a certain area, you can do that. Once you're done, you get this little option box here, you can give your shape a name. You can add a description. You can add an image, and this will create an image in the pop-ups that you get when you click on this shape. So I've got some links, a link to NP Gallery here if you want to try that out. NP Gallery works great for pop-up images because it does serve all those different sizes, just like we used in the story maps themselves. So you can take the small size and have that be in the pop-up, and if you want that to link to a larger size with the image link URL, you could do that. You could also have the image link back to maybe even the NP Gallery listing itself for that image. So here's the small version URL that you would copy the address for that and just paste it right in there. And say you want the big one to go to the big version, copy that and paste it in. Add a little text. So there we go. Now we have a basic shape with a pop-up to see what that's like. You can switch back over to like details and click on it. And here is our pop-up with our photo and our description and the name. Let's say you don't want it to be green. Well, you can come back here and this change symbol is where you would customize that. So you've got the fill color and the outline of the shape. They're different. You can set the color and the transparency of them independently. So if I wanted this to be a blue fill and you wanted it to be even lighter, then you can up the transparency on that. If you wanted it to be a solid shape, then there you go. 0 transparency. The outline, you can have a transparent outline, no outline at all. You can add transparency to your outline, so it could be kind of a translucent green. You've got width options and pattern options. All kinds of choices to make there. So so now we have a solid blue shape. And we can add other things to this layer. We can move the shape around if we didn't place it right the first time. So lines kind of work the same way. And these points up here, they're kind of all the same thing. They just give you different default symbols. But a cool thing about the points, they can have all the same information that your shape can have. But the symbols is where it gets a little fun. By default, it takes you to these shapes, but if you click on this drop-down menu here, there is actually a National Park Service library of symbols. So this is kind of the first place you want to come and look and see if any of these will suit your needs. There's a symbol for everything. You can find some binoculars, for example, various wildlife symbols. This is all official NPS stuff over here. So, and you can specify, it shows you in real time up at the top what size it will be. You can also use an image to upload a custom ping, a small ping. you can get really creative with your symbols that way too. And you can explore all these other libraries as well. But the one to know about really is this National Park Service one. So there's that. We've got text, so you can add labels. The text, you can't click on the text, you can't interact with it. It's really just a label. So you could say bird viewing location. And you can place it. You have different options for how it's placed if you want the centering to be the thing that sticks. Basically, this is because it's to help make your text dynamic. It's going to stay the same size and everything as the map zooms in and out, so it's never going to not be readable. You want to make sure it's placed just right so it doesn't overlap any of the wrong things. So maybe this one, I want it to always be next to the binoculars. And so you can try it, experiment a little with different zoom levels. Don't just get it all perfect at one zoom level and think that you're good. Helps to play around a little bit. All right, so back to details and then back down to content. You can see our layers here. There's a little checkbox section where you can turn them on and off. And edit will get you back in to editing mode. So you can add more or change the things that are already there with that. I think we covered everything there. So now let's head down to adding layers that already exist. We're going to turn our little custom one there off for now. So adding layers that exist already, it's also up here. We've got a variety of different sources. The main two, we're gonna go through them all. But we're gonna start with searching for layers. So this is where you come to find either your layers, which would be under my content, but you also have a drop down here, and my organization has a whole lot of great stuff. What's in here is also detailed in the open map, open data link over here to give you a sense of what you can search for, since the possibilities are kind of endless. If somebody's created it, it's probably in there. So things like boundaries, trails, vegetation, there are climate trend maps. That's a pretty new, very cool addition. So you can click on any of these or do a search. And all these results that turn up here are the same things you can search for right from inside your map portal. So say I want some park boundaries. You can type that in, first result, park unit boundaries. So you want to know a little bit more about it, just click on it and it will tell you the same information, again, that you can get from the open data portal there. And you have the option to add it to the map. If you already know it's something you want, then that little black plus sign gets you there as well. Oh, look, here is Petrified Forest National Park, and it doesn't look all splotchy. So we've just achieved something cool there. What else do we have? We can find NPS trails. And the official ones are named by the projection, and the official ones also have this little green check mark over here. The Park Service has marked these as kind of official. You'll notice sometimes there's lots of options. It looks like this is the same as this, and it kind of is, except you'll notice these little icons here are different. This one is a map image layer, and you hover over, and this one is a feature layer. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of layers. There's tile layers. There's map services, all kinds of things. And basically the difference is in the ways that you can customize these different layers and in how quickly they display. There's kind of a trade-off between those two factors. The feature layers are generally more customizable. They might come with some styles already applied to the features that you're going to add, and they're going to be dynamic. They're going to look really nice when you zoom in and out. Image layers might not always, but they might load a lot faster. So if you don't need to do a lot of custom styling and make your trails look like yellow or something like that, then maybe the map service is just fine, the map image layer there. I mean, and you can play around. If one of them is just loading really slow for you, then you could switch it over. Let's just try this first one over here, see what happens. It looks like it's slow, so maybe that was the wrong choice. But in any case, we'll move on and just try another fun layer as well. So these are the fun climate trend ones I was telling you about. Oh look, here's our trails. So we'll be able to kind of change the colors of those. You'll see how the shapes kind of adapt a little bit as you zoom in and out. So anyway, yeah, so we can overlay the historical temperature changes that the United States has already experienced. And again, you'll notice this one's a tile layer, map image layer. We've got another feature layer here. So that in this case, the tile layer for the whole country is going to be pretty quick to load. Comparatively speaking. Looks like the Southwest has already experienced quite a lot of temperature change. There's another one for climate trend summary statistics for individual parks. Could play with that one as well. There's just so much stuff to discover in here. So more to play with for another day. And back here we can kind of turn some of these on and off for now. Maybe we'll come back to some later.
Jessica, we had a question, and
sure.
It was, why do some layers say they can't be added, like the Land Resources Division layer that was on the initial list?
On the initial list, in the PDF that I sent?
It was the Land Resources Division layer that was on the initial list without searching for something.
Oh, let's see. Just under my organization, it's possible, this one here. It's possible the sharing is not adequate or something is buggy on the back end of this. Yeah, possibly the author of this layer needs to go and take a look at it. Yeah, that's all I got.
All right, thanks.
You'll find things in here at kind of every level within the Park Service by all kinds of different NPS authors. Basically, if they've shared something with the organization, it's going to be here. And not everybody kind of goes through the QA/QC on their map layers. So you will sometimes find some that don't work as you expect.
We got some clarification from Roger Johnson and also Lisa Nelson. Roger says you need to select a specific feature layer for the lands data. And also Lisa mentions that the layer is internal only, which means you have to be on the NPS network to use. So that might be a couple of the reasons.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you, Roger and Lisa, for the clarification.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. All right, so here are the NPS layers. There's a lot of them. And there are layers from outside of NPS as well that you can search for. Back to this drop down up here. There's a couple more options, Living Atlas and ArcGIS Online. I'm going to say unless you know what you're looking for in ArcGIS Online specifically and you know that it is from a trusted source, you might want to leave that one alone. Living Atlas things have been through a bit more of a vetting process, so they're more likely to work for you. A lot of them are offered by Esri and various other trusted contributors. So in here as well, there's just so many options. You can get imagery, you can get hill shade. Right here is an example of that. You can get maps that look antique. If maybe you're doing a cultural resources project, they have these modern antique options that can be fun. So all kinds of stuff in there. And some of these, you know, maybe rather than layers, you say you want to, I mean, this is more suitable for a base layer, right? So, so you can do that as well. You can kind of back out of that add content area and make one of these a base layer by clicking on these three little dots over here and say move that to my base map. And maybe you want the hill shade to be part of the base map, but you want to combine it with the NPS base layer there. So you can kind of come in and change the transparency of it. It's going to be part of my base layer, but I want it to be mostly transparent to kind of emphasize the topography a little more. Infinite possibilities there. In this case, I think we're going to just remove that, and we don't need to keep modern either for now, modern antique. But there are lots of layers for storytelling for different kinds of stories, so lots to explore. So layers from the web. There are more layers than what you can find, even just NPS layers. There's more than what you can find by searching in this part right here. So I've got a couple of sources that you can check out in this PDF here. Let's look for now at the INM REST services directory, see what that looks like. This is, there's a lot of inventory and monitoring data in these folders. It doesn't all make a ton of sense with the folder names, because once you put something somewhere, it's kind of stuck that way forever, because once people start pointing to layers, they're just where they are. But you can find geologic maps for a whole bunch of parks. You can find vegetation maps. You can find inventory and monitoring network boundaries. So that's this one here, actually. Boundaries for inventory and monitoring networks. So the URL for these map server, what look like pages, these are things that you can add into your web map. So if you just copy the URL and come back to your map and add a layer from the web, the default option is this web service, which is what we were looking at for the monitoring networks. So you can paste that in and add it to your map, and voila, now we have inventory and monitoring networks. Another example of adding something from the web, I gave you an internal link for this, but if you just replace that CMS with www, that should work. You don't actually need to save it, but you want that URL there. So the Southern Colorado Plateau Network has this file stored in the nps.gov CMS, which is a great place to store CSVs that need to be kept up to date and to retain their same name, so that you update the CSV and the web map updates at the same time. It works better than the data store and other places because of the way it keeps the file name. So that can be a cool place to store stuff. That's add layer from web, and then you have all these other choices here. So that's an example of a CSV. You can also have a KML file. This is one of the file types you'll get from Google Earth. Various other services that you might find from different sources around the web. You can see what some weather stations look like in the Southern Colorado Plateau Network. Eventually. Did I add that? I think I did. Oh, there we go. It's just slow. Sorry. So we've got a bunch of weather stations, but they look pretty funky right now. And it's taken me to some options for styling. So you can decide how to style the information from the CSV. You can decide what's important for that style. If you want to divide them up, like if there are different types of stations, for example, you could have them be different colors. If they are kind of all the same sort of thing, you could say show location only, and then it will just make them all the same color. Your options here allow you to come in and style what these points look like. So you'll recognize this from the math notes layer earlier. It's still got our National Park Service icons in here. So if we could find one that was weather related, then maybe we would use that. And now we've got weather symbols. You can adjust their transparency, the visible range. So this is like, maybe you don't want to see all of the weather stations at this zoom level, but you do want to see them when you zoom in some more. So that's what that controls. You could also have it work the opposite way around, where you see them when you're zoomed out, but not when you zoom in. So just adjusting these sliders here gets you different effects there. So now you'll see, still don't see them, but eventually, I guess I set it really too strict. There we go. I'll have it show at the city level. There we go, there's some weather stations. And they have these crazy pop-ups, which we'll get into in a little bit. But basically that's two different examples of how we can add things from the web. Other ways of adding things. You also might have some layers stored on your computer. Maybe your GIS person gave you a zipped shaped file for something, or you could have a CSV that you've just made and you don't have it stored on the web. You just need for it to be in this one story map. So layers from files are also an option. They have to be under 10 megabytes in order for you to add them here. If you've got a bigger file that's more than 10 megabytes or with more than 1,000 features or points, you will need to get help from an administrator to add that to ArcGIS Online for you. So here we can choose, let's see, we've got a birding spots CSV, we'll give that a try. So it's just really simple. And again, you've got options for styles if they all need to be different or the same, or what attribute you want to show. The name is just fine and they can all be the same. For adding a shape file, so that does have to be zipped shape file that includes, you know, the whole package of files that go along with that. And here we have a shape file, and options lets you change what color it is. Maybe you don't want it to have any fill, but you do want it to have an outline. You can specify all of that and see how it looks. And again, the visible range, watch out for that. If you see something grayed out in your content panel, like these two are grayed out right now, that means they're there, but the visibility is, you're not at the right zoom level to see them. So if I keep going, then here's my frame. So that's how that works. So now kind of some more fun parts with things you can do with layers. We've looked a little bit at the styles and the visibility and the transparency. That is to go back and change that after the fact, after you've set it for the first time. Like, say I don't really like these black spots that I agreed to when I first added the layer. When you hover over these layers in the content section of the web map interface, you get all kinds of little options here, and this colorful shapes one is where you can go back to that style settings. So you can come and see if there is a symbol of a bird or something. Since these are in fact birding hotspots, or you know, whatever the case may be. Maybe there's seals in Arizona. oh, too small. So go back in there again and you can adjust the size of it. So there we go. Let's back up for a little bit and talk about filtering. So currently we're in the Southern Colorado Plateau Network. So, you know, maybe we don't need to see all of the other networks in the country. Maybe we just want to focus on the one. So we can find our monitoring networks here and expand it down with the little arrow. This little filter, the little funnel icon, is where you come to filter the content of one of your layers. So here you get all the field names. Like if you picture this as a CSV or something, it would be, these would be all your column names. So you can say you want to filter by network code. The network code is SCPN. You can use that filter and all the other networks in the country are gone, save for that one. Filtering could also work the other way around. You could say the network code is not SCPN. And apply that and it will show you everything but. And now that's kind of hard to see here, but if we went ahead and say the networks should have a fill, like maybe we want to gray out all the other networks except for SCPN. Selecting all of the ones that are not it and giving them that fill can help you like highlight something. So there's so many possibilities. You can do the same thing for like the park boundary layers, for example. If you want to only show the park units that are in a particular network, you can filter that as well. So here's our park boundaries. Find the code you want to filter by, and say we want to make sure that the park is just petrified forest. Now we just have petrified forest. So that's the basics for how the filtering works. You can get a lot more advanced with all of these things. But to keep moving along, what else? The labeling, right? So we've got a park boundary, but it does not have a label. Same with the network. So to expand this little menu, the 3 dots, what's this? We've got options in here for pop-ups and labels. So create a label. And again, text, it does not give you a whole lot of options. If you really want to get creative with text in a map, you need ArcGIS Pro desktop, something more advanced than ArcGIS Online here. But this will do what you need it to do for the most part. You can apply some basic styles or not. You don't really have font choices. You can choose from the various bits of information in your layer what the label should actually be. Like it could be the unit code. You could add some additional things there, but the unit name in our case is just fine. Labels can also appear at different zoom levels. If you want it to only appear when you zoom in, for example, set it that way. Incidentally, this little black dot here is the current map zoom, so that kind of helps you visualize when you make these decisions about visibility range. Halos are often obnoxious, so be careful with those. You do want to make sure things like color contrast are adequate, though, for the viewers of your map to make sure it's all compliant. There are no limits to the colors you can use. There's no hard and fast guidance about what's good and what's not. Contrast is a good tool to use. Make sure there's enough of it. There's some tools out there on the internet. You could take a screenshot of your web map and plug it in there, like the WebAIM contrast checker, for example, to see how you're doing. But nothing here is going to stop you from making a bad map, so just be conscious of that. So that's labeling. You don't always get control of precisely where it goes. It depends on your layers. And other things. So now we're going to get into very quickly what to do with these crazy pop-ups. Like, this is not what you want the public to ever see, this kind of mess of information. So how to rectify that is we're going to do this birding spots layer and come down to configure pop-up. So here we've got a bunch of options. You can customize the title and everything that shows up in here. The title right now is kind of okay, but say you wanted to change it, this little plus sign here lets you pick from other standard options, or you can create sort of a template for it. So you could have this say birding at Puerto Pueblo. That's just a really simple change you can make, and now you've got all of your pop-ups for that layer have that new pattern for their title. Back to configure. So right now, what's displaying in the pop-up is a list of attributes. So that is not ideal. There are a couple things you can do. You could have it display a single thing. Maybe you just want it to show the name again. Or you can create a custom display. This one's a lot of fun. So you select that and you have this option to configure. And you get this little WYSIWYG text editor here. And you can use kind of like, it's a more advanced version of what we did for the title with the birding at and then name. So we can do that with our other fields here. And this particular layer has image URL is one field that we can use. And it has a caption for that image. So this little plus sign here is where you go to find the fields, essentially. And a description, there isn't one, so we'll ignore that. But you can come in here and edit the URL, the source code a little bit. It requires a little bit of basic HTML for something like this image here. But you can also kind of see how it would work for any number of things. You can decide to make things bold or whatever. In this case, I'm going to add an image source equals and put that image URL in there. And then our caption can stay below that. Maybe we'll make it bold just to see how that works. And now we have a huge image in our pop-up. So you can kind of go back and customize the size of that in your configuration, and this can be as customized as you want. You can add the alt text in there. You could have a field for alt text so it gets added automatically. Width equals, let's see, 100%. No, 100 pixels. Anyway, see how that goes. So tons of possibilities. Now I have a nice formatted pop-up. So that can work for any number of fields. You could put a label with a colon and then have information show up. It can be hard to visualize all the things that you can do with this, but it's a lot. A couple of things that we're not really going to have time to get into, but there are expressions. For example, you can check the values in a certain field, and like when x equals 100, then show this, and when y equals something, show something else. So you can do calculations. You can query the contents of your map layers and have your pop-ups display particular things depending on what is inside that particular feature. So there's that. There can be custom charts. If you've got data in your field that is like non-geographic data, you can have it make a pie chart or a bar chart or a line chart out of the contents of fields like that. You could have a monitoring site, for example, that shows the results this year compared to average dynamically in a little chart. I'll show a quick example of that. Over here. So here we've got layers that are styled based on a quantity in a certain field in that layer, and here's what the little chart would look like. So we've got maximum and average numbers of molting seals. It's basic, but it's cool. So, all right, now that you have a web map, and I've kind of lost everything that I put there, but you can go ahead and save it. It requires the same kinds of metadata that a story map requires. You can assign categories and tags and save that. Now you have sharing options here. In this case, I'm not going to share this one because it's got nothing on it. But once you save, you do get that option. Incidentally, wherever you have the zoom and centering on this map, when you save it, that's gonna become your default extent. It's gonna determine how it looks in the story map. where the centering is by default when you do that. And there's another place where you should go really to customize that, but make sure you have it as you want it when you save. It can be pretty frustrating when you come back and your map has been moved someplace totally different because you saved it just at the wrong point. So to come back and find this later, your content area is going to contain that web map, just like it contains the story map web mapping applications. So in this case here is my test. If you click on that just the one time, you get this item details page, which again is the same thing for a story map, but here's where you should go ahead and fill in the summary, the description, add a nice screenshot if what it shows there isn't cool enough. You can come back down and add more tags, some attribution, your terms of use, and there's also this metadata section, and you can set an extent, a geographic extent for your item in there, and that will help it display on all kinds of devices in the at the appropriate zoom level and centering based on what you choose there. So this little set geographic extent, you can draw your rectangle accordingly. And just press OK. So now to add this to your story map, head back over to whatever story map you have in your content area. In this case, I've got this one from the very first webinar, and so I want to go and edit it. So now wherever you want to place it, it's considered a media item. And for the cascade here, you're going to find it under My Content. If a coworker made this map for you, if they put it together for you, you'll want to search in the organization here instead. So in this case, the one that I just looked at, you just select it and there it is. So fairly straightforward. The different kinds of story map templates have slightly different processes, but not terribly so. So we can go in and check out the map journal. You can also get into edit from here with the configure app. And pick the section where you want it to go. It could be either content in the side panel here, or it could be main stage content. Perhaps I'm wrong about the side panel thing here. Hang on. Map. So here you need to choose that you want a map and you want to select one that's already created, and there in your content you'll see it right there, or My Organization. So a couple different ways of getting at different things. And there it is. So I think we are out of time. If anybody has questions.
We do have some questions and also some clarifications that some people sent in. one question is, how do you add a key or a legend?
So the legends are in here. Good question. Let's go back into our test map. And we'll plug in a layer. So you can preview the legend and kind of customize it with this button over here. So depending on exactly how we display this data, the legend will change. Say I want this one to actually show some trends. All right. So now we've got a couple of different kind of buckets for what these different colors mean, and you can customize that further. For showing that in the story map, where was my test one? Here we go. We're going to reload that. Oh, well, we'll see if this one works. We've got options in here. You know, I'm not sure where the legends are at. So let me get back to folks on that one. The map series is the one that makes it easiest to show a legend. So perhaps I should have shown in that. It actually has a whole separate suite of options. It's more whole map oriented. So that one makes it easy. These other ones, I guess I'm not sure. Do we have other questions while I navigate there? I don't want to.
We do, and a couple of clarifications too. And Roger Johnson with the Lands Program said the Land Resources Program updates legislative boundaries and ownership data quarterly, and then Park Tiles generally updates shortly afterwards.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of goes back to some of the question we had about updating.
Quarterly,
and then also,
awesome.
And then also the splotchiness that was referred to with the petrified forest. It has to do with NPS ownership, and portions of the park may be within an authorized boundary, but there are some private inholdings that aren't yet owned by NPS. So it's a difference between the legislative boundaries and then specific ownership.
Okay, because it actually varies based on the version of NPS Park Tiles. So I really wasn't sure on that one.
Lisa Nelson also provided some good links, and I can add those in the email that goes out at the conclusion when I send out the links to the recording. Let's see what else. One other question, is there a handbook or a guide that gives guidance for the standard sizes of logos for a map that will be shared on a story map?
For the sizes of logos, can you clarify what that means? Like partner logos or NPS logos, or do you mean like points on a map, symbols?
Yeah, Parker, you asked that question, and I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and maybe you can clarify if that's okay with you. So you're unmuted, and go ahead and clarify your question.
I meant those little seal logos that you were using when you were, demarking bird viewing points in one of your earlier maps that you built. Is there just like a handbook that tells you, it should be 20 pixels tall, something like that?
There is not. It's totally up to you. You want to just kind of maybe try it out on some different kinds of screens. Make sure it's readable for your audience. But there is no. It will max out at a certain point. I think the biggest it can possibly be is maybe 120 pixels or so. So you can't go totally crazy.
Yeah, but unless of course it was like you trying to throw the arrowhead onto the image in a very backwards way.
Yeah,
right.
I mean you can have those custom point markers that could be anything your heart desires, but there will still be a limit to how huge it could be if it has text or anything else that kind of contains information that the viewer needs to be able to see. Like if the shape of the seal is important, you need to make sure it's visible, but there isn't a guidebook that tells you specifically.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
I understand.
Okay. Parker, I'm going to put you back on mute. How do you provide a level of accessibility to these maps?
So they are at least somewhat accessible, I believe, that you can use a keyboard to tab through different features. Things like the pop-ups, you do kind of need to be careful if you do put an image in there, that you find a way to add your alt text. I've found that a little bit of HTML knowledge is really helpful. You can look up at places like WebAIM what the HTML markup looks like to add alt text. It's not super complicated. But yeah, there's only so much you can do on this end. You want to make sure all your names are correct, what shows up in your pop-up, like the title of it, and kind of getting rid of those crazy tables that have labels that don't mean anything to the average viewer. Just really being careful not to show that on your final product can go a long way. And to answer the legend question for the map series, incidentally, we have the option to display it. And where it shows up, you can customize as well at the level of the story settings. You can have the legend be below the description, which is where it is right now, or as a drop down, and so then that's over here. So if you have super map centric stuff, then the map series really helps you use that. A workaround for getting it into other kinds of places is to kind of take a screenshot and then explain it. Explain the legend in the alt text as well for the image that you would insert, say, in the cascade.
Okay. Another question, do you have an easy workflow for formatting a screenshot for the map thumbnails?
A screenshot for the map thumbnail. I think, so my favorite thing to do is get the map positioned how you want it. And let's see. Back out of here. And then I like to use F11 to make the map full screen, kind of take it out of the context of the browser. Sometimes use Control+ to zoom in a little and get it looking just how you want it. And then do the print screen from there, and it can be really nice and clean. You might just have to crop in a little bit around the edges after the fact. But my internet is being a little slow. So if I were going to do a screenshot here, let's just pick a nicer base map again. This is actually a great example of one where you would use the one without boundaries because your layer is the boundaries. So focus it how you like. F11 makes it go full screen. So just kind of get something nice and big like that and do a screenshot, paste it into Photoshop, or you can use the Windows image editor to just crop in a little bit after that.
Okay. Jennifer Hack-Gaynor gave us a little bit of some interesting info about Harper's Ferry Center that has guidance on map sizes, fonts, and other types of map standards. Provided a link, and I will send that link out also to everyone with the follow-up email to this webinar.
Oh, awesome.
So thanks for that, Jen.
Thank you.
There's one more question, and that is regarding Google Earth. And it seems like this question comes up frequently about whether we're allowed to use Google Earth images or not. Is that something you're familiar with, Jessica?
I mean, within this context, it's not really much of an issue because these layers are not Google by default. So you kind of have to try really hard to even get that in here. But I do think, you know, if you come up with a KML layer from somewhere and you use it, that's not going to be a problem. I don't know if somebody wants to correct me on that. But yeah, like the base maps here are not, they are not Google.
Okay. Let me review, see if there are any more questions. I think that's it.
All right.
Last call for questions and typing them in. And it's pretty quiet.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody who joined, and huge thanks to everybody who's been kind of contributing knowledge to this. That's really awesome. I'm
Yeah.
going to learn something too, which is great.
Yep. And thank you, Jessica. Again, thanks everybody for attending. Again, we'll go ahead and get the recording posted. And I will be making a playlist on Google or on YouTube for all 4 of these webinars, so you'll be able to access them and view them and find them all easily. So that concludes the 4th of 4 webinars. Once again, Jessica, you've been incredible. And I think this has been extremely helpful for those of us who've been struggling a bit in getting a toehold with story maps. Thank you so much. And you're getting lots of thank yous coming in. And take care, everyone, and hope you have a good rest of the day.
Take care.
Thank you.